Good Wednesday evening to all of you social media friends, whether you are finishing your dinner and just happen to trip onto this Wednesday evening episode of Real Living in Bolingbrook for myself, my co-host, and our two special guests today. We are all coming to you and sharing content with you virtually. The beauty of this platform that we use allows us to stay warm, cozy in our humble abodes. But on the same token, you get to see us live in a dynamic conversation, as I've already prompted and prepped my guests. So with all of that said, let me ask my co-host to join us. And then I'm going to ask Greg to lead us off with the one thing that we all need to hear probably every 4 weeks, which is what is going on with the business of real estate as it impacts all of our personal lives. So let me check on Greg. Let's make sure he's ready to roll, because I know that as we are coming to you in this live stream conversation, all of us are trying to finish our quick bite of dinner and so forth. So Greg, are you ready? Hang on. Let me wait for you to tell me. Oh, okay. All right. You need a few minutes. No sweat. No sweat. Let's bring you in. Okay.
Hey, Bill, how are you? I always enjoy your introductions.
You always like my little setups for you?
Yeah, thanks.
Well, we need you to be ready. We don't want to catch you off guard. Mm-hmm. And if you're like me, especially tonight, I think when you texted me to say, "Hey, Bill, I'm in," and I said, "Hey, give me 5." I was, shoveling my face
putting on your makeup.
Yeah. So, Greg, lead us off tonight.
All right.
With what's going on with the business of real estate as it impacts all of us.
Yeah, well, I'm excited and I'm optimistic, because for a long time we've been talking about everything is kind of same old from month to month.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the numbers, looking back at the last 30 days, and I actually got kind of excited. And this is not only the real data, but it's also coming from how I've been feeling with how business is picking up and things are really starting to move. So looking back to the last 30 days, in January, we had 75 homes that were under contract. That doesn't mean much, but when you look back a year ago in January, there was 58 under contract. So that's up about 23%.
Okay, nice.
Now looking at new listings coming on the market, we're up 13% from a year prior.
Yeah.
And then the square footage is up about 13.7% from a year prior. So we're heading in the right direction, and I think that's great. Now, the one thing that I'll say is the market's been very tough for the last several years, and I couldn't really see a way out of it, because if you lower interest rates, more buyers are going to come out, the home prices are going to go up, and we're going to be back right in the same soup. But I've always said that if we could get these major conglomerate institutional buyers to chill out or to liquidate, that's going to really help out, I think, the market, because they're gobbling up everything. Right. Companies like Blackstone and Invitation Homes. So anyway, I just saw a report today talking about how Blackstone is spinning off one of their companies and they're liquidating all their homes.
Really?
So even homes that they bought a year ago, taking like a 25% loss on it just to dump it, because the Wall Street investors, I guess, are wanting their money back. It's not lucrative with the high interest rates and high insurance costs. So that was kind of good, and I think that that's going to help. But I think everyone's optimism going into this new year is also going to help out. But I'm really optimistic, and I'm positive. Give you an example. I listed a house yesterday, and we're kind of on the high end of the value range for the home.
Okay.
One day we've had 14 showings, multiple offers.
Okay. Okay.
Now we're calling for a deadline. We're going to go through the weekend. I'm going to do a couple open houses and hopefully get additional offers coming in. So there's a lot of buyers out there, and there's still not enough inventory.
There are. And with what you've described, Greg, I completely agree with you. I think on the institutional investor front, their time horizon probably has hit, and enough of them are kind of knocking on the doors of the general partner, the lead partner of the syndication, saying, "Hey, I need, peace out. I need to exit."
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
that's happening. So
Mhm.
that certainly is opening a crack in the dam as far as getting more inventory on the market. And social media friends, for those of you watching and listening to this, if you have been on the sidelines and maybe you lost some patience looking for that close to perfect home that you want to buy with a broker like Greg, patience is key. I think you'll eventually get there, because while that is happening, institutional investors are releasing some of their inventory. The same holds true in the next tier, and that would be the smaller entities of investors. They feel that, hey, I've held my asset long enough. It's still a great seller's market. I need to exit. I need to take those proceeds and do something else with it. So you're spot on. And as far as buyers, Greg, you and I have always talked about this. In good times and in bad, in high interest rate environments or tight inventory environments, the reality is consumers' lives go on. People get married, people have babies, people get divorced, people have to move, plain and simple.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And with your story of this amount of activity on one of your new listings, that is, of course, higher bracket. Kudos to you. You're absolutely crushing it, doing the right thing for your seller, which is you're driving activity and you're driving beyond what is necessary.
And I would say the real estate business has changed just in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It went from, I'll just say without going through it, in today's market, everything is social media. It's not about marketing to a few hundred people. It's marketing to a few 100,000 people.
Yeah.
So social media, even doing things like we're doing now, is so important. But to give you an example, I'm with Epic Realty, which is it is the most advanced, technology speaking, real estate brokerages out there. Integrating AI and what they do with all their systems is absolutely incredible. So to give an example, the last video I did on my listing, which I wouldn't have done a couple of years ago, I'm looking at the numbers, 19,000 impressions, 14,000 reach, 2,000 engagements where people are either commenting or sharing the post.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing moving forward is going to be so critical. So you want to make sure that if you are partnering with a realtor, to make sure that they're utilizing social media.
Absolutely.
Utilizing funnel pages and landing pages is going to be key.
Yeah. Spot on. So let's now pivot our live stream to talk about one thing that is in front of all of us. For 50% of you who are employees at a company, whether it be big corporate, big tech, down to privately held, medium-sized businesses, for those of you who are employees by now, in this month, you now have your W-2 earnings statement to show how much money you earned for your services rendered last calendar year. What does that mean? That means in the next 6 to 8 weeks, all of us have to look at, good old tax day, April 15th, to file taxes. And for that reason, we have a guest today who is absolutely an expert in that business, which is helping you and I and Greg with tax planning strategies. So let's set the stage for welcoming our next guest, Aaron Zimmerman, into the conversation. And yes, he spends a lot of time doing this stuff, the 1040 documents, the things that most of us kind of dread because we got to like pull that truckload of receipts and whatever and show it to them. So let's welcome Aaron into the conversation tonight.
Sweet.
Aaron, how
Thanks
are
for having
you?
me on.
Yeah.
Doing good. Yeah, how about you?
We're doing good. We're doing good. Can I ask this question of you? Because Greg and I know this is happening more times than not. And that is, there are some households who own real estate last calendar year. And let's make the story kind of interesting. They own it with that low rate, so they are rate locked. They don't want to give that up. And perhaps, given the consultative advice of Greg said, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, keep that home. Stay rate locked, benefit from that, but turn that property into a rental property, and I'll help you buy your next home. So in that kind of a storyboard, Aaron, I think I know this. You've walked that path yourself, right?
Yep. Yeah. Had a house hack and then moved out of it. And I have the house hack in Chicago still to this day. So definitely a good investment for sure. And
Yeah,
would
yeah.
definitely recommend that for for the viewers as well, if it makes sense for them.
Yeah. So for the households, the property owners who are doing that, as they are looking at their tax planning, filing tax returns, literally in the next 6 to 8 weeks, what should they know? What should they prepare for when they are about to engage their accountant? And if they don't have one, certainly I know you're going to say, hey, I'm ready to help you.
Yep, absolutely. So first thing that we'll want to do is figure out what's the date that you first advertise your property for rent. That determines from there what expenses are deductible and then what has to be what's called capitalized, which means it's going to take a long time to recoup that cost. The second thing that we'll want to do is figure out the building cost, which is pretty easy. It's pretty much just what you paid, but then also all the improvements that you did prior to renting it out. And then from there, that can get your what's called depreciation, which basically pay per expense, which will help you save taxes. The third thing that you want to do is figure your bookkeeping. You definitely don't want to give your accountant a shoebox full of receipts, whatever the digital equivalent is. But sorting through the categories on Schedule E, there's actually a Schedule E template on my website that you can use, which is so you want to make sure that you're bookkeeping properly. So the big expenses, we want to make sure that you put those down: mortgage, interest, property tax, insurance. Yeah, if there's any like repairs, maintenance, supplies, anything like that. Those are kind of some of the big expenses that I see. And then from there, you would want to hand it over to your CPA or tax professional to then kind of do a high level overview, just making sure that things like seem reasonable.
That makes sense. By the way, joking aside, yes, it is not about bringing the shoe boxes of receipts. We now live in a digital world, so you're spot on. All of us can get to that digital data. The key, of course, is when someone is going through this process, just like you personally have done, which is house hacking, the BRRRR method, right? It's always about making sure that you maximize as much of what you can tax deduct, creating as close to a positive or a zero cash flow, if that's important, depends on one household to the next. So thank you for reminding us that for those of us who will be first-time investors, or you are growing your portfolio, as you heard it from Aaron Zimmerman, CPA, you got to get used to that set of words, Schedule E income.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, definitely important to know that form for sure.
Exactly. Let's now pivot the conversation and talk about the same kind of storyboard, right? You, as a household, all of you watching us, you've done this process that I described, just like Aaron personally have walked through himself. And now on paper, you've got assets. Not only do you own one real estate property, you might own two, you might own half a dozen to, more than two handfuls. And at the same time, let's make life interesting, because life always is. Let's say your current household and homestead is that of a blended family. And then let's add one more to it. Let's say you are an entrepreneur, you're self-employed like Greg and our next guest. And in that spirit, the question becomes, how do you protect yourself? How do you protect yourself, your assets, and more importantly, right, protecting the ones that you love and the people who depend on you? Let me ask our next guest, Attorney Blake Rosenberg, for some advice that I'm sure he gets this question a lot, but let's get him to tell us in real life, real person, what it's all about. So let's add Blake to the conversation. Hello, Attorney Rosenberg.
How you doing?
We're doing well. So my first question, Blake, is, does every household need to consider protecting their assets and themselves?
Absolutely. I think having an estate plan is something that's essential for everybody. There's different levels of estate plans, from simple wills to complex trusts. So depending on your net worth, depending on the number of assets you hold, kind of depends on the type of estate plan that you'll need. I think for everybody that has kids, it's important to have an estate plan, because you want to make sure if something were to happen to you, who is going to be in charge of taking care of not only your money, but more importantly, your children. If you have several properties, having an estate plan is going to set the assets up to pass down in the manner that you want it to. That's not to say that it will not pass down if you don't have an estate plan, but not having an estate plan can make it much more difficult, much more costly. So absolutely essential, whether it's something as basic as a simple will to something as complex as a revocable living trust.
Yeah. And as I've heard from a few smart people, very similar to you, Blake, not necessarily attorneys, but they certainly are ones that have what I call a lot of assets, perhaps a blended family, and they have loved ones, many, that they have to protect and depend on them. What I remember hearing from them is the more that life gets complex, I cannot leave it to chance as to what my wishes are and how things need to be dealt with for when I'm not around. Would that be a correct statement?
Absolutely. What I've seen a lot is after people are gone, you want to make sure that things are set up the right way so that your wishes are carried out. And you also want it to be set up the right way so that your heirs, the people that you want to pass it down to, don't have to fight for things, because you'd be surprised once you're gone. Sometimes not having the estate plan can also ruin a family, because they're fighting over assets that you haven't prescribed how you want them passed down.
True.
Estate planning is also for when you're around. So it's not just to protect your assets for after you're gone, but it's also to protect your assets for when you're still alive, because all of our estate plans will come with powers of attorney that are important, that when you're alive and something happens to you and you're unable to act on your own, to appoint those to act on your behalf in the event that you're in a coma or you suffer a life or a mind-altering disease such as dementia or Alzheimer's.
Right. And not to mention, besides protecting your assets, I think also in the legal world that you provide your service to, many of us as clients, consumers, as part of helping us spell out very clearly what is our wish, who needs to know what. That's when and where like powers of attorney become very important as well. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the powers of attorney are for dealing with things such as your real estate, but also your healthcare. So you want to make sure that you've made your wishes known so that in the event that you have some type of medical issue that has to be dealt with, that the people that you've appointed are going to do it in the manner you want them to.
Absolutely. So audience members, you heard it from Attorney Blake Rosenberg. When life is changing on you, as your lives, your households get more and more complex, you have more assets to protect, you have more loved ones to watch over, reach out to an attorney. And certainly if you don't have the right one, you got one here dropping some great content, great advice that you can certainly engage for a consultation. So what might be some of these life events? Well, Greg and I see them all the time. The life events can be as simple as, for example, someone getting married, starting a family, or eventually all of us will get there. We all are very young, which is retiring and saying, hey, peace out. I'm not going to work as hard anymore. So as we wrap up tonight's live stream conversation in this episode of Real Living in Bolingbrook, how can you start a conversation with Greg with your real estate questions, your life event to perhaps either house hack, make a move, and or whatever? All you need to do is simply scan the QR code that you see here for Greg. Along the way, unless you're paying cash, if you need to source financing, scan the other QR code. Greg and I will tag team to move you along in your journey to get you to the next chapter that you want. And as we wrap up, I want to thank our guests, Accountant Aaron Zimmerman, for joining us tonight in this live stream, as well as Attorney Rosenberg for sharing both of their time in the evening, probably right after dinner, and perhaps before you have to, put your kids and whatnot to bed so that you can call it a day. So as I close out this live stream episode, let me ask my music posse to play us out. Here we go.